بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So tonight inshallah we're going to begin with the fiqh of this book. So the Shaykh begins the fiqh section by saying وَأَمَّا الصَّلَاةِ فَلَهَا شُرُوطٌ تَتَقَدَّمُ عَلَيْهَا. So the Shaykh says that as for salah, then salah has stipulations, shurut, plural of a shart, that come before the salah. So the salah, it has stipulations that come before the salah. So the Shaykh begins by referring to salah. So he refers to it by salah. So he's actually going to begin by speaking of the fiqh of water and wudhu and things that precede the salah. But he mentions the salah, he begins by highlighting salah because essentially salah is the objective. Everything that comes before, that we're going to mention before the chapters of salah, it leads up to salah. So they are all the wasila, they are all the path, the means to the ghaya, to the maqsid, which is the salah, to the objective, which is the salah. So the Shaykh says that salah has stipulations that come before it. Stipulation, shurut. Laha shurutun tataqaddamuha. So a shart, the ulama of usul al-fiqh have a way to define shart, but just to very loosely explain it, a shart is something that if it's not found in the ibadah, then the ibadah will not be valid. If it's not found in the ibadah will not be valid. The usuliyun then add to say that if it is found, it doesn't necessarily mean the ibadah will be valid. But we're not going to explain that, we're just going to say that if this thing is not found in the ibadah, then the ibadah is not valid. So in saying that, it resembles what is called a rukn, what is called a pillar, and sometimes it is called a fard. So because a pillar, if the pillar is not found in the ibadah, then the ibadah is not valid as well. So what's the difference between the two? There are a few differences between the two. We'll mention them as we go along, but we'll just mention two for now. And that is, a shart is something that is found before the ibadah. A shart is something found before the ibadah, whereas a rukn is found during the ibadah. And number two, a shart has to be present throughout the ibadah, whereas a rukn is a portion of the ibadah. Whereas a rukn is a portion of the ibadah. So a shart, for example, a stipulation of salah is facing the qibla. So before you begin the salah, you have to be facing the qibla. And then facing the qibla has to be present throughout the entire salah. So that's the two differences that we mentioned. And let's take a rukn, let's say ruku'. Ruku', if there's no ruku' in the salah, salah is invalid. That's what we said. Same thing with the shart. If a shart is not there, you prayed to another direction intentionally. Let's just say intentionally, because in certain situations praying to the wrong direction, well, the salah will still be valid. But let's say in a case where you had to have faced the qibla and you could face the qibla, but you didn't, then your salah would be invalid. Or during the salah, you didn't face the qibla in a manner that would not be overlooked. We're going to mention it when we come to the makruhat of salah, if a person diverts from the qibla. But let's say a person diverted from the qibla at any point in the salah in a method that is not overlooked, his salah is invalid. So ruku', let's say, it is found in the salah. It's not found before the salah. It's found in the salah. And it is not found throughout the salah. It's just a portion, a few seconds in the salah of ruku', and then it's over. So that's what the Shaykh is saying. The salah, it has stipulations that come before it. Then the Shaykh says, فَمِنْهَا, and from those stipulations. That because salah has many stipulations, some of them are specific to salah and some of them are general, that are found in most or all of the ibadah. So like general stipulations are, the person has to be a Muslim, a person has to at least be mumayyiz, what we've explained before, and we'll explain it again when we come to that stipulation. But these are general stipulations. Then there are specific ones to salah, like taharah, like facing the qibla, covering the awrah, etc., that we're going to mention. So the Shaykh says, فَمِنْهَا الطَّهَارَةِ. He says that from them is tahara, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لَا يَقْبَلُ اللَّهُ صَلَاةً بِغَيْرِ وُضُوء بِغَيْرِ الطُّهُورِ رَوَاهُ الْبُخَارِي وَمُسْلِمْ. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah does not accept a salah if it doesn't have any tahara in it. If the person did not apply the rules of taharah, which we're going to mention. So that hadith, the Shaykh quoted it like that. I indicated in one of the previous lessons when the Shaykh mentioned how he quoted a hadith, and I said that the fuqaha have a method of how they quote a hadith and which books they go to. This hadith may well fall into that category where the Shaykh did not quote the hadith directly, that's from the hadith books, because this hadith generally comes with two wordings, that لا يقبل الله صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ, that Allah does not accept the salah of somebody if he does something that breaks his taharah and breaks his wudu until he renews his wudu. And in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said لا تقبل صلاة بغير الطهارة, that Allah does not accept a salah, or salah is not accepted without tahara. So what is the meaning of tahara? The Shaykh says فَمَنْ لَمْ يَتَطَهَّرْ مِنَ الْحَدَثِ الْأَكْبَرِ وَالْأَصْغَرِ وَالنَّجَاسَةِ فَلَا صَلَاةَ لَهُ, that whoever does not purify himself from hadathun akbar and hadathun asghar and najasa, then this person, there's no salah for him. Meaning if he hasn't purified himself from hadath asghar, hadath akbar and najasa, we can explain those three now, then this person, if he begins a salah, there's no salah for him. So he shouldn't begin the salah because it won't count. And if he already prayed the salah, then his salah would have to be repeated. It won't count. And if it is found during the salah, it will break the salah. So there would be no salah, no reward of the salah, no acceptance of the salah. The salah will be totally invalid. No acceptance of the salah, meaning sometimes an ibadah is accepted but no reward. Not accepted, but ibadah is valid but no reward. So this will be as if there is no salah. There's no salah for this person. So we'll just translate it like that because there's an usul al-fiqh mas'ala that could connect to it, but we'll leave it out. So we want to explain hadathun asghar, hadathun akbar, and najasa. So these three terms are very important because a few masaa'il they connect to them. So the first one, let's translate them. Hadathun akbar, hadathun asghar, and najasa. So hadathun akbar, if we translate it, it would be a state of major impurity. And hadathun asghar, it is a state of minor impurity, and najasa. Najasa is impurity. So it's not dirt, as some may understand the word dirt, but it's an impurity, something that the Sharia has deemed impure. Because it's not dirt, because if a person has dirt on his clothes, what we describe as his clothes is dirty, it has dust on it or something like that, if he prayed the salah, it may be valid. It will be valid. But it's an impurity where the Sharia has deemed such a thing as impure. And therefore that thing has to be avoided when it comes to the salah. Or those ibadah that a person needs to be clean from. Generally salah and tawaf and things that link to the two of them, or mainly salah, like sajda to tilawa and those things. So hadathun akbar and hadathun asghar. Hadathun akbar, a major impurity. Hadathun akbar, it is a hadath, the fuqaha say, that it is a state a person is in that prevents a person from performing an ibadah that needs a person to be in the state of wudu or ghusl or both. So that long interpretation, some of the fuqaha mention it in another manner. They say you are in a state that you need to perform wudu or ghusl. You are in a state that you need to perform wudu or ghusl. So when you are in a state where you are obliged to perform ghusl, we'll mention those situations later inshallah, then you are in a state of hadathun akbar. And when you are in a state that you are required to perform wudu, then you are in a state of hadathun asghar. You are in a state of hadathun asghar. So we said it is a state that prevents you from doing that ibadah. So an ibadah that needs wudu and ghusl, let's say salah. So when you are not in wudu or ghusl, you cannot perform that ibadah. That's what it means. So that long interpretation, some of the fuqaha summarize it very simply and say you are in a state that you need to perform wudu or ghusl. An ibadah that doesn't require wudu but requires ghusl, reciting the Quran. So if you are in a state of minor impurity, you can recite the Quran. You cannot touch the Quran, but you can recite. But if you are in a state of major impurity, then you cannot recite the Quran. So we said it is a state. It's not something physical. It's a state a person is in. You can't see he's in a state of hadath. It's just a state a person is in that we said he requires to perform wudu and ghusl. Why do we mention that? Because of the next thing I'm going to mention just now. The next aspect the Shaykh says, one najasah, and that is impurity. We said impurity, we're going to mention what things are impure after a few lessons inshallah, but impurity, there's a certain amount of impurity that is overlooked for salah. So that is an exception to when we say and najasah. Out of complete purity for salah, you should be free from all forms of najasah. All forms of najasah. But if there is a small amount that's overlooked, then that's okay. So that's what we will mention that when we come to that part in the fiqh. So when the Shaykh says najasa, it means najasa that is not overlooked. Najasa that is not overlooked. Now, najasa is something that is physical. It is something that is physical. It's something that can be seen. And that's what connects to when we said that hadath is a state a person is in. It's not something that can be seen. Why do we mention this? Because when it comes to masaa'il of water or masaa'il of hadath or masaa'il of najasa and how to clean najasa, the fuqaha mention so many masaa'il and so many details and intricate masaa'il that you have to do like this and you have to follow this step, and if you don't do this it's not pure, and if you don't do this then it's like this, and they mention so many extra things that's caused many people to fall into waswasah. It's caused many people to fall into waswasah. They find so much of difficulty for taharah. They find so much of difficulty for cleaning impurity. They find so much difficulty in cleaning impurity because of these intricate masaa'il. That's why najasa is something, we said it is something physical. And that's why we're going to come a bit later in one of the upcoming durus where the Shaykh will mention that najasa, since it is something physical, for it to be cleaned, the najasa has to be gone. That's it. However it is cleaned, whichever method is used to be cleaned, whether it's water, whether it is a cleaning agent, whatever it may be, if the physical aspect of the najasa is gone, the thing is clean. So irrespective of how many times you clean the thing, it doesn't matter. As long as the physical impurity is gone. That's what it has to do with najasa. For taharah, it is a hadath. It is a state you're in. So you have to perform the wudhu. But for najasa, all you have to do is to clean the physical najasa. So the najasa has to be there. You can't assume najasa. Because it's a physical thing. You can see it. It's either there or not there. And it has signs to it. Color, taste and smell. We're going to mention a few things connected to it. So najasa, to clean najasa, the Shaykh will mention that what you have to do to clean najasa is make sure that the physical aspect of the najasa itself is gone. That's it. Irrespective of how many times you've cleaned the najasa or how many times you've cleaned the najasa or how you've cleaned the najasa. And that's very important to remember. That's very important to remember. Thereafter, the Shaykh says, what taharatu naw'an. Tahara is of two types. The Shaykh says tahara is of two types. So, when the Shaykh says that, he's referring to something specific which he's going to mention. He's going to mention the two types. But for us, in terms of just broadening the fiqh, we're going to say that tahara is of two types in the sense that type A has two things and type B has two things. Type A has two things, type B has two things, right? And type B, that we may gonna count it, call it B, is what we're going to mention with the Shaykh, what he says. And type A is what we've just mentioned, hadathun asghar and akbar, along with najasa. So hadathun asghar and akbar is one thing, and najasa, that's A, type A, and type B is what the Shaykh is going to mention. So he says, at-tahara bil-ma wa hiya ahaduhuma. Sorry, he says ahaduhuma. The first type of tahara, which Shaykh is referring to, what he's referring to, which is type B, but it connects to type A. So we say at-tahara bil-ma. Shaykh says that the first type of tahara is to perform your tahara, which is your aspect of type A. So your tahara, meaning for hadath asghar, hadath akbar, along with najasa. He says you use water. You use water, وَهِيَ الْأَصْلِ. He says water is your main thing that you use for tahara, for your tahara. So we said that tahara, we mentioned type A. Type A, we said two things. Number one, hadathun asghar and akbar, and number two, najasa. Remember it like that. So the Shaykh says that water is what you use for type A. Water is what you use for type A. So for hadathun asghar and akbar, you use water, and for najasah, to clean najasah, you use water. وهي الأصل, and it's the main thing, and it is the main thing. Therefore, a person for number one of type A, hadathun asghar and hadathun akbar, a person can only use water. Which type of water? We're going to mention it now. So he can only use water. The second thing he can use, which is type 2 that the Shaykh is saying, which is number B, which is type B that we mentioned. It is soil or sand for tayammum. But a person cannot use tayammum while water is available and he is able and capable of using water. While he is able and capable of using water, he cannot do tayammum. But if there's no water available, or he is not able to use water because of sickness, or because the water is too cold and he is not able to warm it up and the weather is really cold, or the water is available but it is sold for a price he cannot afford, or it is sold for a price he can afford, but it's much higher than what water would generally be sold for. In this case, it is only mustahab for him to buy the water. He doesn't need to buy the water. He can do tayammum. So generally, water is the main thing you use, and only in certain situations can you go to tayammum. We said that's for your hadath, asghar and akbar. That's why I said type A goes into 2. Hadathun akbar and asghar, and number 2, najasah. As for najasah, we said, the Shaykh said this, the main thing you use is water. And if just now I mentioned that najasah can be cleaned with anything. And how do we understand the two? We say the Shaykh said that water is your starting point. So the best thing to clean your impurity with is water. We're going to come to the chapter of cleaning impurity after a few lessons, inshallah, where we'll mention how to clean it in details. So this is just a quick summary. Number one, water is your best thing that you use. But if you use something else, if you use a cleaning agent, no water, you used detergent without water, you just wiped the thing without water, that the physical najasah is gone. There's no color, taste or smell. We deem it pure. But water is the starting point. So water has a couple of benefits to it. Like what? The fuqaha say, and the Shaykh mentions it, that if there is, after you try to clean the impurity, sometimes there remains of color or smell, and certain things that you can taste, there's a taste. Certain things that you can taste, there's a taste. Doesn't mean you have to taste your clothing or something, because taste doesn't apply to that. But those things where taste can happen, because one of the 4 things najasah falls on, or 3 or 4, when we come to it, we'll mention it, is food. The fuqaha mention how to purify food. So there you can apply taste. So when color or taste or smell remains, after you've tried to wash the thing, and it just seems like it doesn't want to go out, then if you've used water, then the remnants is overlooked. If you used other than water, then the remnants is not overlooked. Therefore, you have to continue cleaning it until it's gone, or take water to try and just clean it out, or if there's still remainder after the water, then it's overlooked. So that's what we mean when we say that water is the main thing you use for type A, which is hadathun asghar and akbar. And we mentioned that what you go to when there's no water, I say no water, but no water or those that connect to water, which is tayammum, is only in certain situations, which is you're using soil or sand. And for B, which is your which is your najasah, you can use anything to clean. But water is best. And water has certain situations where things are overlooked because you've used water, compared to if you used anything other than water. Thereafter, the Shaykh goes on to mentions water. What is the water that can be used for taharah? What is the water that can be used for taharah? So the Shaykh says, any water that comes down from the sky, أو خرج من الأرض, or comes out from the earth, it comes from the earth, then that is water that is فهو طهور. Then it is water that is deemed طهور. So طهور means water that is pure and can purify. So the Shaykh is saying that water that is tahur is two types, which is basically water, you won't find a third type. You won't find a third type in general. It's mainly these two types. Water that has come from the skies and water that comes from the ground. It comes from the sky as in rain or hail or snow, anything from the sky and anything from the earth. Anything from the earth. So river, ocean, spring, etc. All of that is water from the earth. All of that is water from the earth. That is water that is deemed tahur. Water that is deemed tahur, and you can use it then. يطهر من الأحداث والأخباث. That is the water that purifies your hadath and also your akhbath, which is your khabath. So just to touch on this before we explain water in more details, akhbath. Some of the fuqaha call a type of najasah as khabath, because najasah is two types. It's very important to remember this. It will come with us throughout your fiqh. You have najasah that is ayniyah, najasah hukmiyah. Najasah ayniyah is the thing itself is literally impure. This aspect, this object is literally impure. It can never be purified as long as it is in that state. And you have najasah hukmiyah, the actual thing is pure, but impurity has come on it. The impurity has come on it. So something that is najasah ayniyah, an actual physical, the thing itself is impure, let's say blood. So blood itself is impure. You can never purify it. As long as it is blood, you can never purify it. You can never wash it or clean it. But let's say you have a t-shirt, you have a shirt or pants, that is pure. Then impurity came on it, blood came on it, urine drops came on it. Now that is najasah hukmiyah. That is pure, the impurity can be washed off, it can be cleaned. So that's what the second type, najasah hukmiyah, is generally what some of the fuqaha, when they say akhbath or khabath, they're referring to that type, najasah hukmiyah. So that water that is tahur is what cleans the khabath, which is the najasah. وَلَوْ تَغَيَّرَ طَعْمُهُ وَلَوْنُهُ وَرِيحُهُ بِشَيْءٍ طَاهِرٍ. Even if the color, taste or smell of this water has been changed with something pure. كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الماء طهور لا ينجسه شيء رواه أهل السنن وهو صحيح. Because Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم said إن الماء طهور, water is pure, nothing can make it impure. Nothing can make it impure. That part of the hadith is authentic. Then in Ibn Majah and other books, there is another part of the hadith that is actually not authentic, but still the ulama say that it's an acceptable portion of the hadith because all of the ulama practice on it. Ibn Abdul Bar mentions that, and that is إلا ما غلب على ريحه أو لونه أو طعمه, except something that overpowers the color, taste or smell of the water, except something that overpowers the color, taste or the smell. So keep that part of the hadith in mind. And we read the Shaykh said even if the color, taste or smell changes with something pure, so there's no contradiction. We're going to mention it now. So let's mention a few masaa'il connected to water, to complete water we're almost done with. Number one, the Shaykh says that any water that comes from the sky or from the earth is tahur. That means that water, however it comes from the sky, whatever is the color of the water or taste of the water or smell of the water, as long as it came from the sky itself in its pure form, it is tahur. And water from the earth, from the ocean for example, it's not the normal taste of water, it is salty. It is deemed tahur. If water came, it sprouted out of the ground reddish or brownish, we say that water is tahur. That water is tahur. As long as it came out of the ground like that, the water is tahur. Irrespective of the color, taste or smell of that water that came from the sky or itself from the earth, that water is tahur. That water that came from the earth, it is tahur, or from the sky. Irrespective of the color, taste or smell, as long as that's how it came down, then that is pure. That is water that is tahur. Okay. Now, there's a few situations. Number one, sometimes you get algae in water. Algae is that like green kind of things that float on water when it stands for a long time. So would that, and it has a change on the water, would that make the water not tahur anymore? We say that algae does not change the aspect of the water being tahur, because algae is from the water itself. It is like bacteria from the water. It's caused from the water itself. So that would not make the water not be tahur anymore. I'm not calling it tahir or najis for a specific reason. That's why I'm phrasing it like that. Number one. Another example, we say, let's say you have water that is tahur. Next to the water, you have something that gives off an odor, a strong odor that actually can change the taste or the smell of the water. Like let's say you have a bag of onions next to a jug of water, and the smell of the onions got into the water, and you were to taste or smell the water, and it smells like onions. You say the water is tahur, even though there's the change in the color of the smell, because it was something that didn't actually physically touch the water. Number three, another situation. If water changed within the place where the water is found, it changed, it became murky because of the mud underneath. Or the water, when you opened your tap, after not using your tap for a long period of time, then it came out murky because it was sitting in the pipelines for a while. So it changed, the water changed, it's now murky or brown. You say that water is tahur. It changed in the place where the water is found. So you say that water is tahur. Or it changed from something in the pipeline. You say the water is tahur. A fourth situation, we say, let's say something was put into the water. And this something that was put into the water, very important, can be separated from the water. It can be taken out of the water. And this something caused a change in the color or taste or the smell. So something that was put into the water, but you can take out, but doesn't affect. For example, you put a pen fell into the water. You just take it out. There's no change. That water is obviously tahur. But now you put something into the water. The fuqaha mention like you put oil in the water. Or they mention wood pieces, like you have wood pieces that are used to burn for fragrance. If that went into the water, it would change the water because it has a fragrance. Or the oil would change the water a little bit. But you can remove the oil or remove this piece of wood. Then the water would remain tahur. Second last thing we're going to mention with this aspect, salt. If you put salt in the water, so the fuqaha say salt is of two types. The first type is salt that its origin was water. Salt that you took from a salt lake, or salt that was transformed from sea salt, which is sometimes iodine salt. If that was put into the water, even a large amount, and it changed the water completely, that water stays tahur. Because it is changed from something that it actually was water. It's come from water. So that water stays tahur. Now, let's say some salt, there's another type of salt which is called milh ma'dini. It's salt that is extracted from the mountain. It's salt that's generally extracted from the mountain, meaning a non-water source. So that salt was put into the water. Or something else was put into the water. Something tahir. Here's a very important mas'ala because it's a big mas'ala here. Something tahir was put into the water and it changed the color, taste or smell of the water. Then what would the rule be on using this water for taharah? The fuqaha say there's two situations which the Shaykh is pointing out to. Remember the hadith we quoted and the line I quoted from what the Shaykh said? It ties up here. Here, if the color, taste or smell changed from this tahur water because of something tahir, so not najis, something tahir, then here, two situations. Either this water, your description of the water now changes. Meaning you cannot describe this water anymore as just water. You cannot describe the water anymore as just water. You have to add some word to describe this water. Then this water can no more be used for tahara. It's no more ma'un tahur. So now you've added leaves into the water. This leaves now has caused you to call this water tea. You can no more use it for tahara. You've added mint leaves into the water. You can no more just call this water. You would say water with mint or mint water. Or you have rose water. It cannot be described as water. You have to say rose water. That now cannot be used for taharah. But if there was an addition of something tahir to the water, but you would not have to describe it with something extra or in a different manner, then it would stay as tahur. So even if you added, let's say, some rose water drops into the water, just 1 or 2 drops, it changed the smell a bit, but you'd still call it water. It's not so much that you now call it rose water, or you've added some leaves into the water that changed it slightly, but you're not calling it a new name. Then this water remains tahur. This water remains tahur. So that's important to know. Some fuqaha would call a category as tahir. The category now we mentioned that the name changes, and others don't have a category of tahir. They say because it's no more water anymore. You have to say tea, you have to say rose water, you have to say mint water. So there's no need for this category. Therefore, that mas'ala is important to know. When something tahir is added, that doesn't have a connection to the water, it's something separate, and it changes the color, taste, or the smell of the water, but you still describe it as water, that water remains tahur. The moment you have to describe it or call it something else, or describe it with something extra, now it's not tahur anymore. Now it's not tahur anymore. The last mas'ala, when it comes to water, the Shaykh says, فَإِن تَغَيَّرَ أَحَدُ أَوْصَافِهِ بِنَجَاسَةٍ فَهُوَ نَجِسٌ يَجِبُ اجْتِنَابُهُ. That if an aspect of the water changes, when I say aspect, I mean color, taste, or smell. If one of these 3 things of the water changes with impurity, the Shaykh says, يَجِبُ اجْتِنَابُهُ. Then this water, it is obligatory to leave off. So let's just break this down almost word for word. So the Shaykh says there must be a change to color, taste, or smell. Color, taste, or smell, a change of the water, color, taste, or smell. There's 2 masaa'il. Number 1, the Shaykh is saying that water, when you have water, then the moment there's a change to the color, taste, or smell because of something impure, then that water is now deemed impure. That water is now deemed impure. You have to leave it off. I'll explain that just now. You have to leave it off. So we said there must be a change. So merely impurity touching water would not make the water impure. There has to be a change. There's one exception. I'm going to mention it now. If I forget, just remind me. So the water, there must be a change. The second mas'ala we take from that, the Shaykh is not differentiating between amounts of water. He's not differentiating between amounts of water. He's not saying you have what the fuqaha call ma'un qaleel and what most fuqaha say ma'un kathir. He's not saying that. There's ma'un kathir and ma'un qaleel. He's saying irrespective of the quantity of the water, what you look at is change. If it's water that is a small amount or a large amount, it's the same. What you have to see is change in the water. If impurity fell in the water, and you can even see the impurity, but there's no change in the color, taste, or smell of the water is deemed pure. The water is deemed pure. Like an animal that's impure, we're going to mention impure animals later. An impure animal fell into the water. You can see the carcass. It's dead. Or it's alive, but it's there in the water. You can see it there, but you taste the water, tastes the same. Smell is the same. Color is the same. You can use that water for taharah. I said there's one exception, and that is if you have something impure. Remember my example I gave of onions with pure water? That was the change of water with something pure. Something pure changing the water. Here, if you have something impure near or next to water, and let's say the smell of that impure thing. For example, the fuqaha mentioned generally in their books, they say you have mayta, impure dead carcass of an animal. It is next to the water. And the smell, the stench of that animal went into the water, that you can now, if you taste or smell the water, it's different. You can tell that the smell of the carcass has affected the taste or the smell of the water. They say in this case, the water is still tahur. The water is still tahur. They say because it didn't actually change because of something physically touching the water. It is something that did not physically touch the water. It's something on the side. They call it التغيير بالمجاورة. But we'll explain that another time inshallah. So therefore, in our example of change of the water because of something pure, we said it remains tahur. And also with something impure, it remains tahur because it was not an actual, it did not come into contact with the water. So that's an important mas'ala to know. The last thing, so the Shaykh says that if one of the three properties of water changes with something impure, then it is impure. Okay, يجب اجتنابه. So the Shaykh mentions يجب اجتنابه, that if you have water that is impure, what do you do with it? He says in this case, it is obligatory to get rid of it. It's obligatory to get rid of it. So with impure water, you throw it down the sink, you get rid of it. Because you cannot even feed it to animals. Or animals, not that you cannot, there's some fiqh to it that the fuqaha mentioned in the chapter of food, but you do not feed it to animals that you can eat. You should not feed animals that you can eat something impure, or let them drink from this impure water. Because this animal takes the rule of an animal that is called jallala. Jallala is an animal that feeds on something impure. So there's rules to it. Is it permissible to eat in the first place? And then if it's not permissible, or it is makruh, then you have to give it a period of time to actually feed it pure things, to clean its system from the impurity. But they have more details to that. So basically, you have to get rid of that water, or you throw it on plants that you do not eat from. So not vegetables or vegetation or fruits, some plant that will grow fruits that are edible, etc. So you get rid of that water. That's the rule of water that is impure. That's why fuqaha sometimes, some of them categorize water. They say water that you can use for taharah, that is tahur. And those who have a category of something tahir, they say water that you can use for anything else other than tahara. So you can wash your clothes in tahir water, you can drink tahir water, you can feed animals with tahir water, you can use it to water garden or plants or trees that you're going to get something edible from. That's tahir. And as for najasah, it's something you cannot do either of those, any of those things with it. So the final mas'ala with regards to water is the fuqaha mention a mas'ala where if a person has a large amount of water, if there is a large amount of water, let's say river water, even ocean water, anything, and then impurity, a decent amount goes into this water and it changes this water. Then what's the rule on using this water for taharah? So let's say you have the ocean, and then the sewage is emptied into the ocean. So then here we'd say definitely at that point where the sewage enters the water, there's going to be a change. There's going to be a change in the water, one of the three or more than one of the three properties. Then that part, the fuqaha say where the change happened, that part you cannot use. That part is deemed as impure. But then the rest of the water, you can say that part and just around it would take the rule of impure. A bit away from it to the rest of the water, they say that stays as tahur. So they say in this case, when a large amount of water, impurity comes on it, and there's a change clearly to one section. There's a change to one section, they say لِكُلٍّ حُكْمُهُ. Then each section takes its own ruling. That section with the impurity, impure, where the change happened. This section where it's still water is in its natural state, you say the water is pure. So then we've finished everything connected to water. So we'll end there. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to teach us that which benefit us, what benefits us, and benefit us with that which He teaches us. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.